G'day guys, back with the Hour Circle. Today we're going to be looking at how you actually quickly build a list, put an army on the battlefield and play a game of 30k. This is something that I haven't really covered properly before on the channel and a few viewers have requested it, so I'm going to chuck it together today. Please obviously forgive the audio quality. We get echoes and reverb out in this room, but unfortunately it's the best room to film this sort of thing in the house. So, what do we need? Well, first thing we need is, well, our armies, obviously, but we need something to measure with. I like to use American-made tape measures because they're imperial. Metric tape measures are made pretty much everywhere else in the world because we're all in the 21st century. But the Americans really have a hard-on for the imperial system still, so I know they make good quality imperial stuff. And I got my mates to send me these from the US. You're also going to need some dice. Just D6, so as in 6-sided dice. That's what the D6 stands for. A scatter dice, you may not need it in your game, but you want to have one in case you do need it at some point in the future. I picked this D12 dice, so a 12-sided dice, for a turn counter dice. Some objective markers. These ones I made out of the Adeptus Titanicus upgrade sprue. Something like that. This is a bunch of bunkers with some counters glued into the top of them that came in the same sprue. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could buy a second sprue and go all the way up to 10 if I wanted, but 5 is the average objectives in a game. You may have a mysterious 6th objective, in which case you would pick something specifically for that. And I've got some wound tokens. These are 1 wound tokens. I believe they're from Gale Force 9, these particular ones. I don't know if they still make them, but you could just use a dice if you've got spare dice. Usually you try and pick a dice which is different to the dice you're using to roll with, and you can put them next to your characters to represent the amount of wounds they've lost. So pretty simple on what you need there. You also need tokens and templates relevant to the army that you're playing. So if you're not using them, well, you won't need them. That's pretty simple. So in the game of Horus Heresy, there are different types of units. So we'll start with characters. These are independent characters, the HQs of the army. What they are is determined obviously by the rules, but independent characters essentially have a sort of free will in that they can be joined to pretty much any unit within reason. Now, when I say this, a character on foot can be joined to bikes, jet bikes, jump troops, but those units are only going to move as slow as their slowest person. So, yeah, a bit of a downside there. You can't go joining things like monstrous creatures, vehicles, that kind of thing. So, unlike 8th edition 40k, where characters sort of just free roam on their own around the battlefield, giving off auras, not in 30k. In 30k, if you do that, people could just shoot your character to death. It's that simple. Characters are not immune to just being picked out directly and shot. Hence why you put them into units. Independent characters can join any unit. Units themselves, though, will often have their own upgraded character. In this case, we have squad sergeants. Squad sergeants are a type of character themselves, and they get the benefits of being a character, but don't have the independent character rules. They can't go running off and join another unit. Now, character means that essentially your strikes are a little bit better. You can perform challenges, so directly challenge an enemy character, in which case the two of them are separated from an existing combat and fight one another separately. Or perhaps this character is shooting at the unit with a bolt gun, for instance, and he rolls a 6 to hit. That means it's a precision shot, and he can actually pick the person in the unit that shot lands on. So that's the benefits really to being a character. Characters also have generally higher leadership and higher stats. Unlike in 8th edition 40k, in 30k, most models are 1 wound models. The exception being when you get to something like Mechanicum units and Ogrins, where there's a lot of multi-wound models. But they're on quite large 40 and 50 mil and 60 mil bases, which lets you know, hey, this thing's going to have a lot of wounds because it's huge. Characters as well have very low wound counts. 3 is quite common on most of the major HQs, and the minor HQs, or headquarters units, so the lesser characters, have 2. This is not as bad as you'd think because, unlike in 8th edition, every weapon in 30k, unless marked otherwise, only does 1 point of damage or 1 wound. So you can't have it going, oh, I hit you with this weapon, it does D3 wounds, oh look, there's 3 wounds, you're dead. It doesn't work like that. The only addendum I'll put to that is destroyer weapons, which I'm not going to go into today because they're not something you should be worrying about in introduction games. And weapons that are double the toughness of the person they're being shot at. So, for instance, if a weapon is strength 8 and the person it's attacking is toughness 4, if it wounds them and they fail their armor save, then they are instantly killed by it. But apart from that, wounds is very simple, and it means that tracking wounds in this game is very easy because, for instance, if I were to be playing a game here, the only wounds I would have to worry about would be the ones happening on these guys here. And they've only got 2 wounds each. Once they use their 2 up, they're dead. This also goes for close combat weapons. Generally, we'll do 1 wound unless stated otherwise, exceptions being things like force weapons. So, what are some of the types of units in the game? Well, we have infantry. Infantry, as modelled by my black shield here, they are basically the standard models of the game, obviously. Infantry, it's all in the name. They move 6 inches. Everything moves 6 inches. Nice and easy. Again, one of those things that 8th edition decided needed to be changed. In 30k, really movement's not an issue. Just 6 inches. Every model is going 6 inches when it moves. When infantry charges, they roll 2d6. In this case, a 7, which will be the average roll, by the way, on 2 dice. That is the distance this unit can charge, which would put them within 1 inch and a successful combat. So, you've got that happening there. Infantry is also affected by things like difficult terrain. So, for instance, if there was a dead vehicle in the way, or perhaps a tree, some bushes, a lake, something like that, and I was to move my unit through that, I actually have to roll a dice to see how far I can go. So I'll roll 2 dice, and I roll 4 is the higher number, so I can go up to 4 inches through that terrain. If I choose to charge through the terrain, I roll 2d6 and subtract 2 inches from that. So the 7 here would go down to a 5. So again, pretty simple stuff. Where this changes up slightly is going to different types of infantry units. Some, like this Sekhmet Terminator, well actually I never use them as Sekhmet. I just use these as Legion Terminators in Tartarus armor. So these Terminators here, for instance, function identically to these guys. The bike over here, however, moves faster. The bike actually can move up to 12 inches. Pretty far from the front of its base to that point. Bikes and Terminators as well are not affected by moving when it comes to firing their weapons, which is something that infantry are subject to. Their particular war gear, in this case a bike, and in this case Terminator armor, give them relentless special rules, which means that they can move and shoot as if they hadn't moved at all. Infantry, on the other hand, suffer a penalty, and whilst it won't affect their standard weapons such as bolt guns, if they have a special weapon such as the graviton gun over here, then they'll be snap shooting some weapons. Snap shooting a weapon means it can only hit on 6s because it's heavy or it's bulky or it's complicated in some way that taking aim at an enemy unit, it can be quite difficult for them. And so to represent this penalty to their ability to hit the enemy, they only hit on a 6. And if it fires a blast or template, then they can't shoot it at all. Now, all that aside, I've just mentioned we have bikes and Terminators. Terminators work just like infantry, so we'll put him back aside. But the bike is a little bit different. If the bike goes through difficult terrain, then it may suffer a penalty for dangerous terrain. Now this can happen to infantry as well, and essentially moving through the terrain, if it's dangerous terrain, you roll a d6, and on a 1, perfect demonstration, you take a wound, and you get a normal armor save against it. I rolled a 2. This bike with his 3-up armor save would have just died. So that's how you know at least my dice aren't rigged. That's infantry, that's bikes, and that's terminators. There's also jump infantry, which this character happens to be modeling right here. Jump infantry can either move 12 in their movement phase, so that nice big long move, or they can use the jump pack in the assault phase. And when I roll my 2d6 to charge, if I'm not happy with it, well, it's only a 6, I think I can do better, then I get to roll it again. Obviously, I just rolled worse. So that was a bad idea, wasn't it? But of course, if you're out of range, it's always worth re-rolling. If you land in difficult terrain at all when using your 12-inch move, then it is automatically counted as dangerous terrain. So that's quite a complicated little bit of rules I've just gone through. We'll go through some of the other units now as well. So obviously we have monstrous creatures. In this case, I have a Castellaxacea, and I've also got some demon shrikes for Demons of the Ruin Storm I converted up. Just having a bit of fun with these models. As you can see, they're basically the same size, just on a slightly smaller base than the Castellaxacea. Now, when it comes to monstrous creatures, they follow most of the rules for infantry, except they have move through cover, which means that they get bonuses when they're moving through difficult terrain, bonuses when they're charging through difficult terrain. They also have attacks which ignore armor saves. There's no negative modifier to your armor, it just flat out ignores your armor saves. When they do their attacks could often be double the toughness of the model they're striking, which could lead to instant deaths. They also have the ability to do what they call a smash attack, which is trading all of your attacks for one very strong attack. Flying monstrous creatures have the benefit of being able to fly through the air, and whilst they are flying, they can move very long distances, 24 inches for example, and any shooting that's performed at them can only hit them on a 6, as shooting at them is very difficult because they're moving so fast through the air, and that's called snap shooting at them, which I explained earlier, you're only hitting on 6s. Other than that, monstrous creatures, very similar to infantry, just with many more wounds. Then you have vehicles, such as walkers and tanks. Walkers, in this case a dreadnought that I converted up as a Mortis dreadnought for my 1,000 Suns, with little magnetic arms. Well, this guy walks the same and moves the same as infantry, but he has what we call armor facings, as does this tank. So the front has a certain value, the side has a certain value, and the rear has a certain value. And unless you can meet or exceed that value on your to wound or armor penetration roll, as it's known against vehicles, then you will do no damage to the vehicle. If you do exceed it, you roll on a table to see what the damage caused is. And the vehicles also have their own version of wounds called hull points. In both these vehicles' cases, it's 3 hull points. So the dreadnought moves like infantry, but much like a Terminator, in his tactical dreadnought armor, it can fire as if it hadn't moved at all. Very cool unit, very underused, probably because it's just too many points. The vehicle, in this case the Rhino, has 3 hull points, a front armor of 11, a side armor of 11, and a rear armor of 10. So a weapon must exceed those values to damage it. And this unit can also transport a full unit of up to 10 models, because obviously the HQ is sitting out off to the side at the moment. So this whole unit could fit into this vehicle, for instance, and is moved around the battlefield in it. This vehicle can move 6 inches and the guys inside can still hop out, or it can move up to 12 inches. If it does so, then it starts snap firing its weapons instead of firing them at its full ability to shoot. These weapons are also twin linked. Twin linked just means, in 30k, If you have a certain number of shots and they miss, you get to re-roll those shots. And they may still miss. Too bad, so sad. If you're attacking a vehicle as well, you can attack them in close combat, and all the attacks against the vehicle, unless it is a walker, will strike the rear armor of the vehicle. Armor facings are very important in 30k. You want to be facing your strongest side towards the enemy unit at all times, and, well, frankly, keeping some distance because you don't want them to charge you and blow you up. If you face your rear armor to them, that's a huge tactical weak spot right there, which is, again, something that 8th edition doesn't really go into. Now, on top of these types of vehicles, we also have what we call Lords of War or super heavy vehicles. For instance, we have Imperial Knights, such as this bad boy here. An Imperial Knight is just an absolute powerhouse. Their attacks have things like D attacks, they ignore a lot of armor saves, their weapons are incredibly strong and huge, obviously. Plus, they look freaking cool. They look great in any game. But one of those things that you don't want to see in low points games. I don't really believe people should go out and collect a knight army as a starting points level army in 30k. It can be done. It is legal, but it's sort of frowned upon in the general community, especially because a lot of lower points games, like 1000 points games, that kind of thing, are played in Zone Mortalis. You simply can't use knights in those games. So you're shooting yourself in the foot. The army may be fun to build, paint, collect, but you won't be playing much with it because games just won't be available. And of course, there are super heavy tanks, like this Mastodon here. This is an original Mastodon too. One of the first ones produced in the world, by the way, from the first initial production run. Came all the way over here to Australia. And yes, I can open it up for those who are curious. So, tanks like this Mastodon here have the same sort of rules as other vehicles in that, yes, they have an amount of hull points. Yes, they can be damaged over time, but they have many, many more hull points. And unlike another vehicle, if you score a hit which manages to get through their armor, they're almost impossible to destroy in a single shot, unless it's by a destroyer-grade weapon. Apparently, by the way, this could walk through there. I'm not sure how that works with doorways that small inside. Anyway, super heavy Lords of War, that kind of thing, you will not be seeing them below 2,000 points for a start. That is the first restriction on Lords of War. Lords of War are for 2,000 points and above. They also cannot take up more than a quarter of your army's total starting points value, which makes it quite difficult at times in taking them. Some like this Mastodon here, this thing is like 700 points or something off the top of my head, and it makes it quite difficult to fit into games because of that. So, just quickly overview to what are the unit types. I haven't included flyers because they're more of a conundrum. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at the actual rules for the army. So, in our actual rules here, I only use book 1, it's out of date, but 95% of it still applies. If something is relevant that you need to know that it's changed, I'll point it out. But book number 1 here, we have our unit stat line for our unit up the top here, the Praetor. So we have our points value, 100 points. Weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, all those sort of normal stats. Your weapon skill, all it means is if you exceed the other person's weapon skill, 3s to hit. Easy. If you're the same weapon skill, it's 4s. Right up until the point where they are double your weapon skill plus 1. Then it goes to 5s. So if your weapon skill 3 and their weapon skill 7, 7 is 3 times 2 plus 1. That's just how I remember it personally. Strength 4, similar sort of thing. If you're against strength 4, it's on 4s. If you're against toughness 4, it's on 4s. If it's strength 4 fighting toughness 3, it's on 3s. If it's strength 4 fighting 2s, it's on 2s. It gets better as you go along. However, a 1 is always a failure to wound. Conversely, if you're strength 4 fighting toughness 5, then it goes up to 5s to wound. If you're strength 4 fighting toughness 6, it goes up to 6s to wound. If you're strength 4 going up against toughness 7, it's 6s to wound still. But if you're going up against toughness 8, which is double your strength, you can't wound at all. So these are the simple rules to follow right there. And a lot of people seem to have a lot of trouble with this, which is why they've changed it so much in 8th edition, 40k, and Age of Sigmar, where it's weapon skill is something like 2+. You just always hit on 2+. Or your to wound roll is always on a wound amount. Not relevant in 30k. Yeah, okay, there might be some tables you have to memorize, but honestly, it's really easy if you just remember it like that. For every point of difference, the dice is going to modify by 1, basically, in most circumstances. Ballistic skill in this game is, I would say, probably worse in some ways than 8th edition, because the chart is a little bit odd. But essentially, ballistic skill 2 and is hitting on 5s, ballistic skill 3 is hitting on 4s, ballistic skill 4 hits on 3s. So it's sort of take that number away from 7 is what it hits on, until you get to ballistic skill 6. Then it comes back around to the start, and it goes, you still hit on 2s, but you can re-roll the dice if you miss, and on a 6 you still hit. And it gets better as you go on until you get to like ballistic skill 10, and it's 2s to hit, and failing that, it's 2s again. Not common at all. Generally, most things only go up to ballistic skill 5. 6 is a rarity. Obviously, unlike in 40k, your characters here have a range of war gear options. This is all the different things I could do with a model, all the different weapons I could arm him with. So I'm not locked into buying a character and he is armed a certain way. So you don't just look at him and go, oh, he's got a sword and pistol. He uses the sword and pistol stat line. No, I could go, that could be a chartable saber, a power weapon. It could be a paragon blade. There's 3 of the examples there. His pistol, it could be a bolt pistol, but it could also be an Archaeotech pistol. So I've got a couple of different options. His armor, it could be power armor, it could be artificer armor. It could be pariah armor if I'm playing something like the Black Shields. So there's a few different options there. I've also got options for if he's in a completely different type of armor, Terminator armor, down the bottom. Now, again, it doesn't really matter if you can't see it too well, but if he's armored like this guy, he might have different options again with what I can do. So I'm not locked into building a character one way. And this is one of the things I really dislike about 8th edition, just to slide a slide dig in here, that these guys, each of these characters I make is my own custom character. Here's something unique that I have crafted for my army and built. That's something 8th edition just can't do. Alright, so right now you're probably going, man, you've explained all this convoluted stuff here. You've explained a whole bunch of rules for infantry, stuff like that. How on earth do you play this game? Well, look, I could show you missions, for example. Oh, you roll a mission up, you play that. Really, you just want to see how I'd play this game. Well, I have 2 squads here. They're both close to each other. What are they armed with? Well, this squad here has bolt guns and boarding shields, so does this squad. They've got graviton guns. We're not going to worry about that. The phase is simple. We move. I can move them up to 6 inches. They're just going to stand still. I can shoot 1 shot for each guy against them who's within 12 inches, which is everyone. I have 2 options here. I could rapid fire my bolt guns, which is the ability of that weapon. If I choose to rapid fire my bolt gun, I'll get 2 shots, but I won't be able to charge. So, for the record, I'll pull up the weapon stats. These are weapon stat lines for 30k. Yes, I know it's very bright, I apologise. It's just a very bright day despite being freezing cold. So we have a range, a strength, an AP, and a type. Type on a bolt gun is rapid fire, which means you can shoot twice within half range. Penalty is you can't charge afterwards unless you have something that overrides said rule, like a bike or a Terminator, or you're a walker. Now, the range is 24 normally. Well, I'm well within 24. I also have the option of firing my bolt pistols. My bolt pistols are not rapid fire, they are pistol weapons. That means I can charge after firing them. So in this situation, you would want to charge, but you want to wear the enemy down a little bit first. So the way to do that is by shooting at them. So I will get 10 shots from my regular guys at these guys. I'm looking for 3s to hit because I'm ballistic skill 4. 1, 2, 3 hits, and I'll roll the other half for the guys. 4, 5, 6, 7 total hits. Their toughness 4, these weapons are strength 4. So 4s and 4s are the same value, which is 4s to wound. And my other two, nope, so that's 3 wounds total. They have a 3+ armor save. There is no negative modifier at all here. And one of the models closest to closest will die. We'll just pretend our character is not the closest for the ease of gameplay. If a character is the closest model, what often happens is that you will do what they call lookout sir, which is when the wound is allocated, but before making the armor save, roll a dice on a 2 for an independent character or on a 4+ for a normal character. Basically, someone else dives in front of the president and takes the bullet for him. 3, he would be fine. So, I'll then go, all right, I've shot with my guys. I'm now going to shoot with my character. My character has a higher ballistic skill of 5. So, roll to hit. He'll do it on a 2. And on a 4 to wound as well. And fails to wound. I'm now going to charge with this unit against that unit. This unit that's being charged gets to Overwatch. Now, this is good for them because every one of these guys who has a bolt gun, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, get to fire rapid fire response. So that's going to be 14 shots. So I'll break it up, do 5, then 5, then 4. So first one, no hits because it's only snap firing. 1 hit, and the last 4, a second hit. So now they get to roll to see if they save, to wound, 1 wound, and saved. So this unit will now do their charge. 2d6 inches, 11, huge charge. So that's basically everyone touching. The only guy who's not is going to be the guys at the very back who will sit out. Now, the attacks are based on initiative. So the initiative step is everyone who's at 5 will go first because it's the highest initiative. So these two guys will do their attacks against one another. Nobody got a charge bonus because of the boarding shields, but normally when you charge, you'll get an extra attack. So this character versus this character, they're both just regular consoles with power weapons. No artificer armor, anything like that. So they're going to fight each other at the same time, and they each have 3 attacks, but because they have a sword or a one-handed combat weapon and a pistol, they get an additional attack. This additional attack, all these attacks, the same weapon skill, which means 4s to hit. As I went to roll the attacks then, the dog barked incredibly loudly. Downside of hunting dogs, guys. 4 dice needing 4s to hit. So he gets 1 hit. He needs a 4 to wound, because strength and toughness are the same. Gets his wound. Now, the weapon has an AP value. In this case, the AP is 3. That means armor that is 3 or worse is ignored. So this character takes a wound. But as they're the same initiative, they strike at the same time. So even if he were to die in that attack, he still got his attacks off. So himself, 1 hit and no wounds. Now the rest of the squad will attack at initiative 4. So at initiative 4, our units get a 2-inch pile-in move. So both sides will essentially get all of their guys into the combat. So every guy gets 1 attack, except for the sergeants who go last. So first 5 guys in blue, 2 hits, 2 wounds. 2 armor saves for those guys. That's less than their armor save of 3, therefore 1 is removed. But those guys will also get their attacks still. Over this end, these 4 blue guys, leaving the sergeants to last because they are armed differently. 4 hits, very good roll. 3 wounds, and all the armor saves are made because I only have to roll a 3 or better. The attacks back at them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to start with. 4s to hit because they're the same weapon skill, and 4s to wound because they're the same strength versus toughness. So 2 wounds, 2 armor saves to the blue guys, they're okay. And up this end, we get the dead guy and the other 2 guys. So 3 attacks, all of which hit, 666, number of the beast, and 1 wounds and 1 armor save for the guys in blue, which is a 3. So the guys in blue are okay. Now the sergeants are the last. The sergeants are initiative 4, because they have this big clumsy power fist, they have to strike last in close combat. The benefit of the weapon is they get double strength, and the AP of the weapon is 2, which means it is anything with a 2+, which is the best save in the game, doesn't get a save against the weapon, unless they have an invulnerable. So these guys will strike 2 attacks from this sergeant, 2 hits, and on 2s, because he's just so strong, and he rolls 1, he causes a wound. But these guys do have an invulnerable save because they have boarding shields. So that guy gets a 5+ save against which he fails and is instantly killed. The other sergeant will do the same thing. He scores 1 hit as well and needs a 2 to wound, which he gets, and the same 5+ invulnerable for this shield, which he passes. So this unit in red is leadership of 9. However, they took 1, 2, 3 wounds. So 3 from 9 is 6. They need to roll a 6 or better on 2 dice to hang in the combat. They fail. Now, this is important. Because the red unit has failed, they now are going to get possibly run down because they are going to run away from this combat. So what we're going to do is each highest initiative, so 5 and 5, are going to roll a dice. Whoever rolls higher gets away, basically. So the red need to roll higher, the blue only need to equal the speed of the red. So the red rolls a 5. So the blue needs to roll a 5 or a 6, they get a 6. Because they have caught these guys, they don't get to run away. Instead, they're all instantly killed. They broke and ran from the battlefield. And now this unit that won gets a D6 consolidation move. So they get to move 3 inches because they won the combat and killed everyone facing them. And the red army is removed from the game. That's it. That's Horus Heresy in a nutshell. You could play it on a bigger scale, obviously. You could play it with, you could have your dreadnoughts and you could have your tanks, your terminators, you could have your bikes, But you could also have your demons. You could also have your Imperial Knights. The scope of the game and the scale of it dramatically changes up based on how big and nasty the things are that you're adding to it and how much more complexity you can add. But that is essentially the game right there. It's just move, shoot, charge, attack, and then morale at the end of the phase. It's really simple. So those are things you got to keep in mind with what 30k is. Anyway, I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Hopefully you've found this a sort of semi-helpful start to what 30k is. I've gone into a lot of the basics of like how a unit moves, for instance, because people have said they've had difficulty with this. They're coming and looking at this game system from 8th and they're going, hey, how many wounds does a bolt gun actually do? What's the damage of it? Well, the damage basically is a 1 on a bolt gun. But because people don't understand this, I've got to break it down to that level because, well, it's been 3 years since 8th edition came along. That's long enough for people to start forgetting, or people who've joined the hobby since then to have no idea what came before. So that's why I've had to do it this way, describe what infantry is, what a monstrous creature is, what a vehicle is. And I haven't played about how to penetrate a vehicle, how to roll on the vehicle damage table, because it's not important to this basic level. This is just to give people the idea of what it'll be like to play a basic game. And if this interests you, perhaps look into the game and try playing it for yourself. The rules are easy to get. You can download it from the Black Library or buy the books from Forge World. Make with the Outer Circle. See you all next time.